welcome everyone to this event on reflexive ecologies of post-internet art. It is part of the Environmental Arts and Humanities Initiative here at CEU, and also part of our class that we collectively teach with Alan and Guntra on environmental arts and humanities. So it's a kind of open class which we decided to open up to our students and also to other interested artists, and we very much welcome you here, although it wasn't easy to find us here on the fifth floor, who is not so familiar with the way things work here. So we're going to talk about internet, post-internet, art and ecology, all in one thing. And
you know, this thing of post-internet art, actually I think you can feel symptoms of post-internet art, of the post-internet condition. You can pick up on them in your everyday life when you're on the metro or the underground, and you look around and you see that every single person around you is all staring at their phone and interacting with another realm, rather than just being in the space or reading a book. They're reading their phone. Or if you go to an event and it's organised through Eventbrite, everyone has to click on it, and then when you finally get there, it's half empty, even though it was all fully booked, because everybody has to click and feel sure that they have a place at the event before going there, and then they decide not to go in the end. Or also, recently we had this feeling of post-internet when we heard a presentation by some young art critics who were talking about they feel really sorry for young artists who don't have Instagram, who don't have an Instagram account, because how could a curator ever come across their work if they hadn't flicked past them on Instagram? So these are all signs of the way the internet and online culture has completely infiltrated into all aspects of life.
So post-internet, it doesn't mean that you leave internet behind, but really it's referring to the fact that everything has become internet. And it's not like postmodernism that critiques modernism, but really it's really taking things from the moment when the internet became the decisive moment of our everyday lives and lifestyles. And it really is a part of contemporary art practice that could be described as post-internet, the one which is entangled between the real life and online life without really making differentiations. The one kind of art practice that goes into galleries, but it's not leaving the online presence, and also reflects to this social media interconnectedness and other aspects of our contemporary living, which is so much connected to the online platforms and so on. Although there are many artists who are dealing with the physical aspects of the natural world, it often is very self-referential as well. And this is one aspect which we wanted to bring out, the materiality of the internet practice.
And when you think of post-internet artists, very often they're playing with this jumping between the online world and then IRL or in real life, and maybe moving objects from the internet and exhibiting in a gallery, and exploring this proliferation of the internet through society. But one aspect that post-internet art and post-internet art's discourse does not really address that directly, which we want to talk about here, is really the environmental, ecological impacts of the internet in terms of its...
And we all know we have to give up the straws and we shouldn't use plastic, and we know the diesel cars are bad, and kind of we're aware of these other things, but rarely do we think, what does it mean? Do we want to print out this email, or how does it work with the storaging of the messages and being all constantly downloading the Facebook and being all the time up to date, and what is the really environmental impact of actual internet?
And post-internet also gives you a feeling of the history of the internet. It's not just something about now, but it's also something that has a history. And there's one particular issue which is quite interesting, and that's that the World Wide Web was conceived in 1989, which, for this region, for the world, was a particularly important date. Something was ending. It was a changeover period then. And then in the post-89 period, especially in Eastern Europe, the internet and net art and mailing lists really took off, and there was a lot of interest in the potential of the internet for democratization, for communication across borders, and somehow this really developed in Eastern Europe. There were some important initiatives in Budapest, the whole Meta Forum, starting in 93 onwards, in Ljubljana, Ludmila. There was also an organisation set up in the mid-90s, and also in Latvia, in Riga, there was also a lot of work done.
A lot of them are connected to Soros Centres of Contemporary Art, or funded through them, such initiatives. But this is, the artists felt like we're reaching a new era. It's post-89, it's post-communist, but it's a new kind of status quo, new zero moment in our history, and we can just really reconnect and start from somewhere where we're all equal, and exploring internet from that position. And really it's something which we think is connected to this region that goes back in history, where the art always was more perhaps politically aware and more socially focused, and always even the abstract art always had an aspect of socially engaged practice. And so was the history of the computer art. If we look, for instance, in '68, when ICA in London had an exhibition called Cybernetic Serendipity, it was all about technological funfair and what future technology can provide for us. But it was a little reflection of what does it mean for society to have computers and machines dominating the world. And at the same time, in the same year, there was a symposium conference held in Zagreb in framework of new tendencies, and already then it was addressed the question of what is the use of computers and art as a political and social tool.
And one particular aspect of that Zagreb meeting was Gustav Metzger, the artist Gustav Metzger, wrote a special Zagreb manifesto, and some of the things that he talked about then in his short manifesto are also incredibly relevant for today and for this debate over internet and post-internet. He was writing about the man-machine interface, and about how some artists are just exploring the technology, but actually others are thinking about the crisis in society, the interaction of human beings and the environment, and also exploring the concept of ecology, as he said.
Sorry, I didn't get the name.
This is Gustav Metzger, who is an artist, a conceptual artist, who was born in Germany and then left and lived in the UK his whole life. Sadly died last year, and very involved with ecology and auto-destructive art, a very interesting artist. And he wrote this manifesto, and he talked about also artists dealing with ecology, and which he said included the entire technological environment that man has imposed on nature. And he said that the man-machine problem was this big problem that needs to be addressed, and that the computer should be the servant of man and woman and nature as well. So again, this environmental aspect and social aspect was very prominent in an East European approaches to computer art. This is before the internet, but to computer art in the 60s.
Okay, so the question is, what happened to the early net artists who were communicating through mailing lists and exchange of database and information, and so internet as a medium? What happened to these artists of the 90s today, and why are we talking about post-internet art, and what is the relationship to the 90s situation? How did it change?
So one thing was the technology change. So the HTML 1.0 was all about sort of static web pages. It was still quite easy for people to manipulate it and sort of DIY culture. And then in the 2000s, in the noughties, you start getting dynamic web pages, and it starts being about social media and apps, which are sort of too complicated for anyone to really control as such. And then you get the spread of real commercialization and monetization of all transactions on the internet. The internet's a use for surveillance, and it no longer feels that activists and artists can win the battle over the democratic control of the web, and they somehow retreat to the dark web.
But we didn't really want to do an event about hacktivists and how an artist can be an activist using the new technologies. What we really wanted to address is to think about that what is presumed as something very online and digital and nothing to do with the real world actually has a real materiality and physical presence, both in the components it uses in the machines we use, but also in the effects it has. And for that, we couldn't think of better artists to invite than Joanna, who we saw in Barcelona presenting precisely on this matter, and we're very happy that you could come and join us here, and we're looking forward to your presentation. And we also invited Inga.
So, who we also met when she was a curatorial fellow at the Apple in Amsterdam, and she's done a lot of work at this interface between art and ecology, and especially the institution that she works in and is involved in the Latvian Centre for Contemporary Art also has an exhibition which is really interesting on this sort of pre-post-internet moment, with which you have to tell the exact title. It's like 1,437 unread messages about the generation who, I probably got the number wrong, but the generation just before the internet who weren't internet natives but maybe migrated to the internet.
And this was also a great opportunity to invite Aaron, curator from Trapo Gallery here in Budapest, who has really promoted and worked systematically with the artists from the internet generation and opened the gallery space for these new explorations and presented them here in Budapest, and had a really amazing show recently, just finished maybe last month or year.
Last month.
With the Lithuanian artist duo, and we invite him to really introduce his practice and also talk about that exhibition. So we really want to invite you now and to give us the presentation. And we'll have the discussion after the presentation. So if it's not totally urgent,
if you have a very urgent question, that's fine. But otherwise, try and keep your more general questions for the end. So there'll be 3 presentations, and then we'll have a chance for discussion at the end. So Joanna Moll would like you to come and take your place. So Joanna Moll is a Barcelona, Berlin-based artist. Her work critically explores the ways post-capitalist narratives affect the alphabetization of machines, humans, and ecosystems. Her main research topics include internet materiality, surveillance, social profiling, and interfaces. She has lectured, performed, and exhibited her work in different museums, art centres, universities, festivals, and publications around the world. She is also a co-founder of Critical Interface Politics Research Group at Hangar Barcelona, and a co-founder of the Institute for the Advancement of Popular Automatisms. And she's also a visiting lecturer at the University of Potsdam and the Escola Superior d'Art de Vic in Barcelona. So over to you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Maya and Ruben, to invite me. I've been in Budapest and I really, really enjoyed it. So I told them I don't know what to expect, and it's a really amazing city. So thanks again. Okay, can you monitor me the time? Just let me know, because I don't want to overstand it. So okay, I'm gonna talk about the internet, basically, as a background of my work. And the thing is that internet, this is like the image that we have about the internet. This is like the narrative that we are being told about the internet, right? It's like this cloud, it's sort of an ethereal fiction. It doesn't have a materiality, it doesn't smell, it doesn't taste, it's something that's completely neutral, it's somehow a pure entity, right? Yeah, even though like the internet is the biggest infrastructure that humanity has ever built, but yet it's so invisible. It's like if we look around, I mean, I don't really see a router here, I don't really see cables. The only thing that we see is actually devices. The devices are an integral part of the internet. Yeah, but that's the only thing we see. And this is very, very, very problematic because the internet in reality is this. And the internet is highly polluting. Like in 2008, it exceeded the emissions, the CO2 emissions of the aviation industry. And the connections and the devices connected to the internet have been raised like at a whooping pace. Yeah, I don't know exactly the numbers now, but it's amazing. It's like an industry that has really, really grown a lot. Yeah, and it's really highly polluting, but it's really invisible. So as I said, this internet. Yeah, I'm not sure if some of you are familiar with these sort of images, but this is it's one of the most important hubs of the internet. It's in New York, and those are cables that connect transatlantic undersea cables to the mainland. Yeah. If somebody is interested in more maps on internet cables, I can give it to you afterwards. Also inside the internet, there's people trying to run the internet. Yeah. cables. Like when I see this, I'm sort of amazed how the internet can actually work, right? It's like every time I send a message through Telegram, Signal, WhatsApp, whatever, it's like it's going through all these cables, and probably somebody's touching a cable in that precise moment, and this is insane. It's something that we don't picture, yeah? So that is it. Okay, internet. I'm gonna give like a very, very brief background. Internet started in 1969. Yeah, it was American Army funded research project, and it was called ARPANET. And it just had like these 4 nodes, yeah, in the west coast of the US, connecting these 4 research centers. And from then on, it expanded, yeah, until what we know as the internet now. Yeah. Basically, like the internet, just an interconnected network of machines. Yeah, machines that are connected to each other, to them, each other. That's right. So basically, I have like this computer is connected to the same router as most of the devices that you have here. Yes, we have a small network that is connected to other networks. Nevertheless, we know really not a lot about the material impact of all the devices that we use to connect to the internet. This is a very interesting installation. It's from a British art group. It's called Yoga. I'm not sure if somebody knows it. But it's I really like it because it connects like the coal needed to generate electricity that is running our devices. Yeah, it's just avoiding all the middlemen, and they just make this coal lungs that they are generating electricity to run those machines. Yeah, and we tend to neglect, like, or we tend not to know what's behind our interfaces, right? Because as the internet is the biggest infrastructure that humanity has ever built, we just connect to interfaces. That's all we see. Yeah, and basically, like the electricity needed to produce all these devices, yeah, it's spent. Okay, let me rephrase this because I have it in Catalan in my brain. Sorry. Like 80% of the electricity that the device is going to use in its lifespan, 80% is going to be used just in the production process. Just the 20% left, it's going to be used in its usage. Yeah, and that's something that we barely know. Did anybody know this before? Yeah. Anyway, so this is very interesting because it connects. And coal is responsible to generate more than 40% of the global energy still. And in some countries like India, China, Mongolia, and so on, it's more than 70%. So it's an essential resource in our global economy. And this piece, I think, it's exemplified. It's very, very good. So this is a research that I found. It was published here last year. I found it in December 2017. And look at this. I'm not sure if you can see it at the end, but the mobile industry, it's the most polluting industry in the world already. And that's quite surprising. It surpassed the meat industry, housing, cars, and coffee industry. That I'm not a coffee drinker, but I didn't know that the coffee industry was so super polluting. Yeah? Okay, so then you wonder, why is that? How can it be that the mobile industry is more polluting than the meat industry? I'm going to explain to you right now. The mobile industry, for example, an iPhone, like Apple disclosed a study, maybe a couple of years ago, and it said that a single iPhone, I think it was iPhone 5 or 6, had more than 10,000 parts. Yeah, in this, I have an iPhone, well, I just put it somewhere now. It's different 10,000 parts. And these 10,000 parts come from more than 700 different territories and are assembled by more than 300 pairs of hands, which is a lot. So imagine just to produce a single iPhone, the amount of kilometers that all these micro parts have to travel around the world. I think we sort of calculated it with a friend. It was like to go to the moon and back. Yeah, just for one iPhone, just to assemble one iPhone, which is quite insane. And I'm going to talk about more of the material impacts now, so you're going to see it. Okay, there is something, I'm not sure if somebody is familiar, like the rare earth metals. Yeah, rare metals, it's some sort of metals that allow technology to be smaller and more efficient. Yeah, especially especially in the microchips. Yeah, without rare earth elements, we couldn't have most of the technology that we have now. It just makes things smaller and more efficient. Yeah, this I think it's cobalt. There is officially 17 different types of rare earth metals. So, for example, this is a microscope image of a lithium battery, and it contains cobalt and manganese and something else. Yeah, that's why we can have all these very tiny batteries thanks to rare earth metals. Because I don't know if there is somebody that is proficient in chemistry now, but that's what they do. Okay, then rare earth metals are crucial to our society, yeah, to the development of ecology. Think that there is not a lot of rare earth metals left, and actually rare earth metals are also crucial in the development of green technologies, and we're running out of them. Yeah, and that's a super problem. Okay, so I'm not sure if you heard about the US survey agency, Geological Survey Agency, somebody? So this is a US agency that basically goes all over the world to look for critical resources, yeah, and to make a study of where resources are allocated. So this is Salar de Uyuni, I think, in Bolivia. Here there is like one of the biggest reserves of lithium in the world. Yeah, and lithium is essential, as I said, to build batteries. All the batteries that we use. I'm not sure, like for now, I think I have a battery of my mobile, battery of my computer, and battery of my tablet. Yeah, so we are living surrounded by batteries. It would be nice to count how many batteries we have here around. But anyway, I'm not sure what's happening politically in Bolivia now, but we're gonna hear about it. Some things will happen there pretty soon. And now you're not gonna be surprised that Afghanistan has a massive lithium deposit as well. Yeah, and as you know, Afghanistan has been in war with the US since 2001. Yeah, so just something to think about. I'm saying these things very, very, very fast, so we can discuss it afterwards. I just have 30 minutes, so it might sound a little bit superficial, but okay. This is a mine in China, in the north of China, in Bayanovo. This is the mine that has the biggest resources of rare metals in the world. Yeah, I think it produced more than 40% of the rare earth metal in the rare metal supplies in I think 2014, 15. This place is highly inaccessible. Actually, this picture was taken by a UK also based artist group collective. It's called Unknown Fields. I don't know if somebody knows them, but they made a lot of an amazing research on this kind of materials. So basically, one of the artists just sneaked into a van, and he came here walking like 20 kilometers across the desert, and he took this picture undercover. Yeah, it's a place that nobody really knows in the world. It's not even located in the maps. So it's here. This is a coltan mines in Congo. I mean, those mines have the coltan issue, and Congo has been hardly broadcasted in the news, so I guess most of you know about it. But basically, there is like coltan is also crucial for the development of technologies, also for battery-related issues. And I guess, as well, some of you might know, there is like it's a very conflict area. Yeah, it's like a lot of times that where the mines are were just being depopulated. You don't say that. Yeah, depopulated. Well, women raped, people killed, and so on. Yeah, just to move people away and allow like some warlords to exploit these mines. Yeah. Okay, that's the second process. First is mining, and then is refining. Yeah, the rare earth metals are very, very hard to clean. I mean, once you extract some minerals from a mine, you need to clean them in order to have like the pure element and be able to use it. Yeah, to manufacture technology. So this is quite hardcore. This is also in the north of China or in Mongolia, I think, it's more or less. So this guy is in stage 1 of refining some rare earth metals without any sort of protection. This is super toxic. Like one ton of rare earth metal produces around 75 cubic meters of wastewater, like acidic wastewater, and say more than 1 ton of radioactive material. And this guy is just here without gloves, without protection, like doing all these procedures. Yeah, it's insane, and also nothing is really secure here. So then all these radioactive materials that I just told you about, they end up here. This is a massive lake next to this refinery, also in the north of China, almost in Mongolia. Yeah, you have like this super radioactive lake, which is insane. Yeah, most of the people that were living around the lake, they had to move because there was a lot of problems, health problems, especially cancer. Yeah, and other related sickness like from all this radioactive scenery. This is another quite an extreme case. This is in Chile. Yeah, it's eucalyptus forest that is put here. It's an artificial eucalyptus forest that it's used to absorb the acidic water derived from the copper factory. Like with copper, in order to use it, basically you put it in powder. Yeah, so you took all the water out. So all this wastewater, it's being absorbed by all these forests. So this is like a dead eucalyptus forest because it absorbs all this acidic water. Yeah, it's massive. Like there is like acres and acres of this dead forest. I think it's quite impressive. Yeah, this thing they show it in the presentation we are together. And then there is assemblage and producing. Okay, this is a Foxconn factory. It's one of the biggest factories in China. This is where most of the iPhones are being produced. Yeah, it looks like really a chicken farm, completely. So you like see all these people like just producing like micro parts of an iPhone, yeah, assembling one of these 10,000 parts that I already mentioned. And these are the dorms of this Foxconn industry, like the industry, the factory. Yeah. There is a study, some people that went there and talked to the people, it's a documentary, and they stated that more than 50% of the workers suffered from depression, more than 30 or 20 from anxiety, and more than 4% had considered suicide. And those, you see those networks here, those nets, those are anti-suicide nets that are installed in the dorms of these factories. Yeah, it's quite harsh. Yeah. So this, sorry, this slide had to go before, but this radioactive lake that I showed, also these collective unknown fields, they took material from this radioactive lake and they built those three vessels. And this represents the amount of radioactive waste from producing a smartphone. This is the amount of radioactive waste that derived from the production of a laptop, and this is from an electric car battery. Yeah. So this sort of real size actually, because I've seen this installation live in Berlin, and actually it's maybe a little bit smaller, but yeah, sort of. Everything was like covered into glass. I mean, it's super radioactive. You can't really get close. Yeah. And then there is waste. Yeah. How do we deal with all the waste produced by our devices? Because I know you are familiar with probably with the design obsolescence. That's how you say it, obsolescence design. Yeah, like for example, an iPhone, on average, it has a lifespan of 1.5 years, a laptop 3 years, and basically most of all devices are 3 years, not more than 3 years. Yeah. So all these devices, instead of being recycled, they're just being thrown away. And the biggest electronic dumpster for electronic devices is in Ghana. The name is, I can't pronounce it, Abloshire, something like this. It's like close, it's a neighborhood next to Accra. Yeah, it's like the capital of Ghana. And basically, yeah, just there. And I've seen like, I didn't take like the most impressive pictures, but if you Google it, you're gonna find crazy pictures. And I think like to go there, it's insane. Like people that work here, also they suffer from many sicknesses. So, it's not just the devices, the physical devices that waste energy, it's also the data. Yeah, data is highly polluting. This is a piece I did in 2014. Well, I can't access now, but if you go to my website, you can find it. So it's a very, very simple online installation. Basically, it is supposed to count the amount of CO2 emissions in real time derived by the global visits to google.com per second. Yeah. Back then, 2014, it was around 55,000 visits per second, and the page, I think, more or less on average, weighted 2 megabytes. So that's the result. You know, like the CO2, it's counted through the amount of CO2 derived from the electricity that it's needed to load this information. Yeah. And what I claim here, on my main intention, it was just to highlight this connection between data and environmental pollution. Yeah, because interfaces then tend to erase friction. Yeah, it's no problem. You just keep on interacting, doing whatever, but it doesn't show any of the environmental impacts of all the actions that you carry out through it. And that's a super problem, especially when I showed before that the mobile industry is the most polluting in the planet. Because it's not just about the production, it's also about the usage that we do. Yeah? And we transmit a lot of data every day in the internet. It's massive. I'm going to show you some numbers now, but it's massive, and it's just going to be even more massive. Yeah? So this was one of the experiments I did. And then I did another one. Which was this. So those, because then I thought, okay, this is just numbers, so how do you relate to reality, right? So here I did also, it's another experiment. I tried to count the amount of trees needed to absorb those CO2 emissions per second. So it's 23 trees per second. Yeah? At the end, this is just collapsing the browser after 10 minutes or so. Yeah, but I thought it was very important. So this is like a series of experiments that I already, as I said, I did to highlight the material impact of network technology, especially when it comes to data. Yeah. Also, in all my projects, I tend to put the amount of CO2 that they emit. Now I lost my presentation. So, there is not really reliable studies on the amount of CO2 that information, like transmission of information, generates. First, because as I said, internet is too big, it's too massive, and it's very, very hard to calculate its real emissions because there is too many technologies and middlemen involved. So, but nevertheless, this I took it from, I think it was a Berkeley study that it was released in 2008, that they stated that to transfer 1 megabyte of data equals 7072 grams of CO2. But if this transmission was done through 3, 4G, I guess 5G now, networks, it was 4 to 5 times more polluting. Yeah? So this don't take this as a true fact, like a complete truth, but it's a reference. Yeah, for example, in terms of numbers, 2015, the amount of IP traffic generated in the internet was 966 exabytes. It's these massive numbers in gigabytes. I can't even pronounce it, sorry. Yeah, 24 gigabytes of data per user, 3 billion users, 14.6 billion network connections. Yeah, in 2018, it's expected to reach this number, which is a lot, because it's exabytes. It's almost double. Yeah? And I'm sure it's going to be even more than this, because there is a study that they checked out last in 2016. Yeah. In terms of art, there's not many artists that have worked in the relationship between data and materiality. Yeah, actually, when I started to do these two, when I did these pieces that I just showed you, I started to investigate and I found this German artist. He's based in Berlin. His name is Michael Saub. That in 2009 he made this installation. And you see, like those are called briquettes, lignite, like briquettes, yeah. That equal is the amount of coal needed to be burned to generate the electricity needed to serve 1 million views of the, you remember the Avatar movie? Yeah? Of the Avatar trailer in YouTube. Yeah? So 1 million views of the Avatar trailer in YouTube equal all this coal. I mean, this is a person, I mean, they're far away, but I guess human would reach, yeah, here. Yeah? So it's quite a lot. And I think it's quite impressive.
What's the name of the artist?
Michael Saub.
Taub.
Saub, S-A-U-P.
Saub.
Yeah, more interesting fact, like number of devices connected to the internet is going to be 3 times the global population by 2020. And why is that? I guess it's quite obvious, right? How many devices you have connected to the internet right now? I have 3. My mobile here, my computer, and a tablet at home. Yeah. And by 2020, it's going to take more than 5 million years to watch the amount of video that will cross the IP networks, which is insane. Which means every second, 1 million minutes of video will cross the internet. Yeah. So then you wonder, I mean, where is all the energy power that we will need to hold this infrastructure? It's just not sustainable. It's going to crash at some point. It's insane. It's said that by 2025, the internet is going to waste, it's going to use 20% of the global electricity usage, which is a lot. 20%, it's massive. Yeah? And it's internet. It's not even producing God something to eat, something to drink. Yeah? Moving physical things. It's just about data. That's a very funny case, but it's more of the same thing. I'm just going to say it in another way. Like it said, the 10 minutes of these cute video cards in YouTube equal 1 gram of CO2 every 10 minutes. Yeah, but again, it's another way to exemplify this. Yeah, again, this is a data center. I put this because it's a very funny one. It's a data center. I think it's in the Netherlands, and it's built inside a bunker, and it's prepared to operate in more than 10 years without any human technical aid. Yeah, and it's closed. And a lot of people tried to break in, including the police, and they couldn't. Yeah, it's a very funny example. Anyway, it's called cyber bunker. It's a nice thing to check. But the thing is, like, after devices, data centers are the most power-hungry elements in the internet. Yeah, actually, one data center can more or less with the same energy as 25,000 households, something like that. How much time do I have?
5 more minutes.
A lot of carbon dioxide.
A lot, yeah. And outside, we know we're talking about this. Have 2 screens, 1 camera, this here. You know, I know it's a bit traumatic, but anyway. So this is a very good friend of mine. It's called Sherlab. They're from Serbia. I don't know if somebody knows them. But I made this amazing study on the algorithmic factory behind the interface of Facebook. So this, you can find all this in the internet. So this is like the interface of Facebook. That's what we see here. Yeah. If that's all the fields, yeah, this is what we see. And all this is what we don't see. So the things that happen after in the interface are much more, how you say it? Well, things after the interface, all these operations are massive, right? And we have no knowledge of any of them. Yeah? And all the amount of information that all these algorithmic decisions take, it's massive, but we don't know. So we have no idea. Actually, this is he compares it, Bladen, he compares it, is the guy that did this. He compares this map of Facebook, what's happening with after Facebook, as the first maps that explorers think of the world. You know, like it's not totally precise, but they guess it's something like that, yeah? So this is constantly changing, and this is not available to the public, and this is actually highly secret. Yeah, Facebook wasn't happy enough about this being disclosed. So, after talking about all this, like the cognitive force that is designing all these devices, the way data and algorithms will work, they lie or they work in this sort of environments, right? Which I think is like great, yes. No? I mean, I think like the metaphor is quite obvious. I don't need to mention it. I don't need to explain it, right? This is actually some offices here of Google in Budapest. I didn't take this picture in purpose. I've been using this picture for 2 or 3 years in my presentation, so I'm happy I'm finally here. So you can go and see these guys, I guess, somewhere here. But yeah, that's what it is. I mean, it's so disconnected from reality as well. Yeah. So if you see like how if all these people that is in charge of designing all the technology that we use, they are so disconnected from reality. Of course, its users, that is us, we're gonna be disconnected the same way, right? And that's very dramatic. And that's something that it needs to be addressed quite urgently. Because, well, this catalog, but concentration of CO2 in the atmosphere in December 2017, like this last December, it was 405 parts per million. I'm not sure if you're aware that the last 7 hottest years in the human history were the last 7 years. And this number, I think the scientific community said that when this will reach 450, that's the point of no return. Yeah? I'm not sure if we reach that point. I don't think that nobody really knows. But this number is increasing at 2 dot something per year. But even this number is increasing itself. Yeah. So it's quite dramatic. I mean, if we want to keep the planet the way we know it, well, we should do something a bit. Otherwise, we'll see what climate change will bring, right? But anyway, because the devices are highly polluting, as we've seen, it's something that, again, I'm going to repeat it, we need to urgently address all these issues. Yeah, so, yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'd like to invite Inga Vaca. Inga Vaca lives in Riga and is a curator at a Latvian Center of Contemporary Art. She was a curatorial fellow at the Apple Art Center Amsterdam, where she examined the intertwined relationship between nature and culture, art institutions and ecology, resulting in a symposium instituting ecologies and a publication. She has recently curated exhibition It Won't Be Long Now, Comrades, at Framer Framed, Amsterdam in 2017, and also curated the Secret Life of Plants, Animals and Other Species at the Büro für Kulturelle Übersetzung in Leipzig, and Lost in the Archive in Riga that took the LCCA's Archive of Contemporary Art as a starting point. She also curated the exhibition Reconstruction of Friendship, which was held in the former KGB house in Riga, and co-edited books and revisited footnotes, footprints of the recent past in post-socialist region in 2015. She's been co-curator of the 7th, 8th and 9th edition of Contemporary Art Festival Survival Kit, which takes place in Riga. She's also co-curator of research project Portable Landscapes, which are tracing and contextualizing Latvian artists' emigration and exile stories throughout the 20th century, which is a current project. Okay.
So basically, I wanted to say thanks so much, Maya and Robin, for inviting me. And yeah, and as I think it's a bit like it's a bit fat. Anyway, but yeah, as you already mentioned, so I have been quite a lot working with the topic of art and ecology. And then another thing that I've been sort of interested in my work at the Latvian Center for Contemporary Art has been the archive. And I was really thinking, and I haven't really sort of explored the post-internet art. And then I was thinking, how can I connect those things to sort of enter in the theme of this presentation? And somehow it also seemed quite logical to me, because in a sense, like if you think about the internet, it's really like the network of networks, or it's like one network connecting to the other networks, and essentially it's connecting all the computers in the network. And then there is the cloud, which is somehow the big storage or the place where everything is stored, where the data is stored, and then through the internet you can access the cloud, or many different people can access the cloud, and then it seems that the cloud is this kind of immaterial thing. So that's why the title of the presentation is The Carbon Price of Cloud Computing, because as already Joanna mentioned, there is quite a lot of carbon emissions when we do any kind of operations on the internet or with the cloud. And and for me, sort of this cloud really much reminded of the archive as in a more traditional form as we used to have it. So that's why I thought that I should show this work by Dayanita Singh, which is called The File Room. And basically, this is also the kind of the work that opens up the exhibition that you mentioned, that is kind of like now exhibited at the Latvian National Art Museum, and which was curated by my colleagues. So sort of when you enter this exhibition about the generation before the internet, the first work you see is The File Room by Dayanita Singh. And this is somehow a very interesting work because this work clearly shows the materiality of the archive, or materiality of the data, or of this kind of abundance of things that we collect. And this materiality, I mean, is really crazy. It's stored chaotically. It is stored, I mean, maybe you don't see it, but since these are archival kind of photographs from India, collected for more than 10 years, they are essentially stored in very inappropriate sort of surroundings for paper. So there is like mold affecting them, and all the different kind of possible, effects. And also you might think like that many information can get lost here. Like how can this man ever find everything? So I can imagine that that all the papers, because these were the court kind of, or like judicial, institutions, and institutions that also like collect information about selling and exchange kind of like things, and so basically, obviously, you can only imagine what happens when this one person, the only person that knows the archive, when he's not there one day, and what happens. And how, what is actually happening, and what will happen when new information will be created. Because also there is, I mean, it's still with the internet and kind of like mobile, and digital data servers, there are also a lot of like paper things collected. So, and they require this architecture that we can actually see, and then we can see how it grows. So, in some kind of sense, it is actually more tangible and more imaginable, because I think like in our culture it's very difficult to speak about things we don't see. So so that's why I thought I should start with this work where I mean, of course, also these things happen behind the closed doors, unless you are actually going to do research or are in need of certain kind of papers. And then I think I will open a video link, which is work by Louise Henderson, which also touches upon something that that Joanna just spoke about, and this relates to this place in Ghana, in Accra, where young workers, young people are actually, assembling and reusing the material that comes from Europe. So in a sense, it's kind of this reverse mining, as the artist has said, because Europeans, they have gone to Africa, to Congo, or to African countries. They have mined things like all these very necessary metals to create those devices, and then those things return back as waste. They return back to Africa, and then these men are kind of like trying to find certain useful things and reuse them again. And then of course, and in both cases these are the people in Africa that are working in those very harsh conditions, let's say. So this is also very interesting that it not only is ecologically problematic, but it's kind of connected to the structures of colonialism and neo-colonialism and structures of economic inequality and the so-called like global north exploiting global south. And yeah, and I think like Louis Anderson sort of really touches upon in his work. So let's just watch it for a while. I hope the sound works.
Now, some people think the cloud is just a hard disk in the sky, right? And you take a bunch of stuff,
personne. Voilà, les Anglais ont couillonné les Africains. Ils viennent enlever leur or et puis ça y est, ils les amènent chez eux.
I mentioned this like work by Louis Henderson. It started with this illegal gold mining site when these people were illegally kind of trying to find gold and sending it over to London, and then it turned to the place where they are trying to find something useful and recycle the waste from the computers. And what is interesting, I think, yeah, is really that the whole kind of way how the video is constructed. There's as an editing table, and in a way it then can be seen as a little bit self-reflective, because of course by all these kind of like layers of how you make the film, you can actually, of course, see that, of course, even by artists Googling and opening all these windows, like he also, of course, spends energy, and yeah, that is creating that same CO2 or that same sort of damage that actually he talks about in his video. And also, its title is All That Is Solid, and yeah, and that's like a reference to the passage of Marx and Engels' Manifesto of the Communist Party, which sort of talks about the materialist conception of history. And yeah, so this is like a tool to understand this social and historical reality, and then the artist sort of yeah, uses that as the title. Just symbolically. And then I will go back to the presentation. Yeah, like, oops. The next artist I wanted to talk about is Katja Novitskova, and she's an Estonian artist, and she's one of those really like post-internet artists. Like when you think about post-internet, she would be the one that you think about. And I think for a while I hadn't really kind of been interested in her practice, and as it happens with many post-internet artists, I have seen them as actually quite shallow, I have to admit it. But then, of course, and maybe also recently, she took part in the Venice Biennial and represented Estonia in the biennial, and I was like already then sort of trying to understand her work more, and I think with the time I really got to sort of understand what actually her practice and maybe many other post-internet practices are trying to do, and essentially that is that kind of visualization of the data and rendering the seemingly invisible visible, and which sort of then later helps us to understand that it actually has a material existence, and it's not only like a cloud and only in the air somewhere. And so something that I was wanted to talk about. Yeah, so one thing is that her work is always sort of populated with those curves and those kind of data visualizations and arrows that point somewhere, sort of saying that there's like this growth of this or growth of that. And as I was reading Tocke Liekeberg's text in the catalogue of the Venice Biennial, and he would also say, because these arrows and these kind of like data visualizations can kind of be similar to whichever thing she represents with that. So it can refer to, I don't know, the shrimp production in a certain kind of like place, and the same kind of arrow can also like represent, I don't know, CO2 emissions in some space. And I will quote something from Tocke's text where he's describing her work and also like kind of bigger context, saying that this production of data is said to double every year. So this implies that the amount of data produced in 2016 equals all the data produced in the entire history of humankind, which is also something that Joanna already implied, that it's an unimaginable kind of expansion. And wherever we roam in our increasingly smart surroundings, we're tracked by algorithms, sensors, cameras, and all kinds of devices which undergo the same exponential or explosive growth as that which they register. So it's a snowball effect. Some of the data produced is the data which a search for data on a browser, such as Google, produces. So, some of the data produced is accordingly also this data visualization. The very fact that we produce data through visualization, which in turn produces more data and visualization, is dizzying, if not counterintuitive in terms of certain types of feedback loops. So the visualization of data is made to make sense of data, which in itself is data. We need more data to make a sense of more data, which is also considered a big problem of big data. Anyway, so I think Tocke really almost poetically puts that problem, and which Katja Novickova is kind of trying to also speak about in her work when she creates this kind of like very simple arrow structures. Like that's one kind of signifier of what she does. And also it's something that is, again, very difficult for a human brain to imagine and perceive. That's why I think, her work is kind of also rather political and really aware of certain problems that the internet creates. And also it connects, it's more complex, of course. It connects, as we see, elements of flora and fauna. And I think, and also some machines that we see here. And something that she does with this flora and fauna, I think, is also very smart in a sense, because a lot of bees appear in her work, or this is the polar bear, which is also somehow very like a most banal reference you would get when you think about climate change. It's this polar bear which is on the ice thingy, which is like kind of melting, and which symbolizes that all the ice things are melting there. And the bee is another figure, of course, because the bees are also dying out, and that's another kind of symbol of the climate change. But I think by rendering these things visible, and I think there is a certain kind of irony and a very smart juxtaposition of things, because in her work, and this is like another room in the Venice Biennial, where these things are sort of made from the machines, which are kind of these electronic like cribs, and somehow when you're standing in the middle and you're surrounded by all of them, and they have these kind of added eyes which are moving a little bit like this, then so she's working with this like robotic machines, and I was even asking like whether there are sensors to them or not, and actually they're not having sensors. They're just there. And so, yeah, so in a sense she's imagining this very already post-human world where you are essentially surrounded by these electronic cribs, by robotic cribs, by certain kind of devices that would take care of your children perhaps. And then so many different questions arise of whether, yeah, it's kind of like really complex and also post-apocalyptic in some way. And I think Katja is also very smart when she speaks about it herself. I need to find the quote. So when she speaks about her work, she also mentions, she says, so what the history of life on Earth tells us is that climatic catastrophes and mass extinctions are always followed by the expansion of new forms. So what will be the new forms of the post-austerity and new prosperity world, from species to artworks? And where will we locate the main sources of growth? So this is in 2013 when she speaks, speaks for Freeze magazine. And I think essentially, yeah, that is what she's trying to do this research and then to try to find sort of this new form. And I mean, that's something that has been the idea of the post-internet art for a while. Should I finish?
Yeah.
Okay. So I will skip some of the slides and I will go to the exhibition because I have this exhibition that happened in Latvia at the Latvian National Museum of Art, and it's called You've Got 1, 2, 4, 3 100 Messages. The generation before the internet, their lives. And basically I will put a video sort of, this is a picture. Actually, it's very funny. The logo of the exhibition was this kind of caveman, and then you see, of course, people. It was one of the most Instagrammed exhibitions that we've ever made. And here you could also see a lot of people sort of using and being able to use different devices that was in use before the internet. So typing, stamping, many things like this. And I will just put a short clip so you could get the idea of the space, because it's very important, because I think what the curators did with the space, even though it was about the generation before internet, I think they created a certain kind of spatial network, spatial idea of the internet where you could really walk and you could make totally your own connections, like a Google search. You go from one place to the other. I mean, you will just see it, and that's, I think, like a very big achievement in terms of the design. So there are no white walls, which you usually have, where you attach things, but it's kind of like this floating place where you really go around. And just to say a couple of words about the exhibition, it is not, it talks about this generation, loosely kind of before the internet, so it's somehow connected to the 60s. Then it is not meant to be nostalgic, because it's not about the time that was better, but it's more like to actually see what were the lives of the people. So in a sense, and touches upon many things. It touches upon the fact that we were thinking now, okay, we're more lonely because each of us are in our own device. And actually no, also here you can see a lot of kind of people, like observing other people from secretly, or I don't know, sending letters and never getting, or secretly documenting an affair, So you could see that it's not like this. No, people were lonely also then, and they were reaching out. It's just like a different way to reach out. Also takes more time. Or, for example, another thing is that it kind of like we are thinking like, okay, now there's surveillance. We are actually being monitored all the time. But it also takes up some very political work. For example, Dmitry Grigo. And he was kind of distributing these small notes where he was like writing messages to his comrades, and he got arrested and sent to a psychiatric clinic in Russia. So, in a sense, it's also saying like, well, people were also, having these kind of like surveillance things or censorship then. And so in all these things that we are thinking, oh, the grass was greener at that moment, they are kind of saying like, no, but we just need to see what that moment was. And in terms of materiality, I also think it's like really great because you can see a lot of this kind of paper, zines, letters, and it's really somehow tangible. And a lot of devices. So, and also it's interesting for all the generations, the ones that haven't experienced the time before internet, and the ones that still can sort of feel some nostalgia over it. So I will not get into more details, but yeah, I think it's that.
You're up next. So now for our final presenter is Aaron Benveshi, who is the curator of Trapor Gallery, which I'm sure many of you will know here in Budapest. He's been the curator there since 2011. He's also worked as a guest curator and curated exhibitions in Kunstlerhaus Graz and Galeria Plan B in Berlin. And beside writing for Hungarian art magazines, he also has published texts in Art Review. He held the Ernő Kalai Grant for Emerging Art Historians, and he was nominated for the Lorenzo Bonaldi Enterprise of Gamek Bergamo. Nice.
My presentation has a title which is called Mythology in the Age of Algorithms. I think I will get back to this point at the end of my presentation, because somehow through this case study of this exhibition, which I will talk about, I will try to come to some sort of conclusion at the end with the connection between modernism or potential ends of modernism, post-internet, and somehow how all these notions and how all these things get linked up. So I'm going through a specific case. I'm going to speak about a specific exhibition, which was done by a Lithuanian artistic duo who call themselves Pakui Hardware. Actually, it's already a nice, or not a nice, I should avoid this word. It's already an interesting case how they gave themselves a name, because it's an collaborative artistic duo of two people, Neringa Černiauskaitė and Ugnius Gelguda, who are both Lithuanian artists, Lithuanian curators, and they asked a third person to give their artistic duo a name, which already constituted their duo as a kind of brand. And what is specifically interesting, of course I will maybe say a few words about their names, but how their practice connects to this topic of what we are trying to speak about now, how the digital environment and how technology is actually shaping physical reality itself, because I think this is the crucial question in the tonight's seminar. Because the digital is not something which doesn't have a body. It definitely is affecting physical reality. Definitely affects our environment, and this is a specific field of interest of Pakui Hardware's artistic practice. And it is also very interesting of how we still keep on calling artists for instance, like Pakui Hardware post-internet artists, but I think maybe we should somehow start thinking about how this thing which we call post-internet in contemporary art should be maybe called new materiality, because it has many connections, even going back to the to the arte povera of the end of the 70s, or from different kind of postmodern art forms which were flooding the art world already in the 80s. So the name Pakui hardware has two components. One component is the word Pakui, which is a Hawaiian mythological figure. So it's a special runner intendant of the goddess Haumea, who is the goddess of fertility. And in Hawaiian mythology, Haumea is the main fertility figure, and her children were born from separate parts of her body, and she has this special intendant Pakui, who is the fastest runner on the islands of Hawaii, who is able to run 6 circles around the Hawaiian islands daily, which is somehow highlighting the position of enormous speed, which is important in Pakui hardware's practice, because they have this mythological runner figure, and they have the hardware, which also seem to be like a device for getting things faster or getting things more efficient. But actually, hardware is the physical reality, which always gets in confrontation with mythology, or gets in confrontation with high-speed encounters. So that's our hardware stands as part of this double metaphor in means of physical barriers in the practice of the artistic duo, and they have all kinds of very interesting art pieces they produce. This is just a few highlights of their exhibition from 2015, which was held in Mumok in Vienna. So they have a special touch for materials which are usually used in the context of synthetic biology, or they tend to play a lot with industrial aesthetics, which all get mixed up with somehow ephemeral material situations or ephemeral installative forms. And this specific project, which we also presented in Trafo Gallery in Budapest, was a spin-off of this project of there, which was called Hesitant Hand, and it was exhibited in the National Gallery of Art in Vilnius in 2017. So what they did is that they worked with this industrial robot, which might seem to be familiar if you think of visualization of factories or car factories, that they used an actual robotic arm, which is in another context a worker in a factory, and they created a special choreography for this robotic arm to show their actual pieces. And while they were exploring the possibilities of how to include a robotic person or a robotic entity in their piece, they encountered a lot of interesting things which we don't normally really know about robotics. So this is the Creatures of Habit exhibition which we had here in Budapest in Trafo, and the interesting thing, or the first interesting thing in the selection of their materials which they used for their works was this textile material, which is a highly durable textile material, which already is in use in factories for robots who work in special physical conditions. So for robots actually have clothes already, who work in special zero or very low temperatures or very high temperatures, and and it's a really uncanny, gloomy thing that robots are dressed up in textiles, and because of their uniforms or because of the effect of clothing, they somehow became more connected to the figure of the human, or somehow with the effect of this uniform, they they somehow tend to be more humanoid than only as a metallic skeleton. So this was one interesting motive for them to work with the hybrid visualization of robots. And the other interesting thing was a paper which they stumbled upon, and it is written by two Oxford researchers, a little bit already outdated because it was written in 2013. So two researchers, Carl Benedict Frey and Michael A. Osborne, examined the likelihood of US jobs taken over by algorithm-driven mechanisms until 2033. So basically, they, on different type of calculations, they found out that in the next 20 years, there is a 99% of chance that all telemarketers will lose their jobs because of algorithms. 96% of cashiers, 96% of chefs, 94% of waiters, 89% of bus drivers, 83% of sailors. So, of course, this is a complex pattern which is based on a sort of abstraction of how highly sophisticated patterns or pattern recognitions are needed for one specific job or one specific function, and how much profit does one specific job create. And with this intersection of the two numbers, they somehow got to this amount. And but on the other end, there is only 0.7% of probability that, for instance, there will be no archaeologists. And that's an interesting thing, that it might seem that that the somehow at the end the ultimate function or the ultimate job or the last percent of activity which humanity cannot give over to algorithms is archaeology, or to search for our own traces in culture or in different times. And this was also very inspiring for the Pakui Hardware artistic duo. So they somehow imagined this exhibition from a perspective of a future archaeologist, which is trying to somehow find traces of our times when this situation is still not exploded, although as in the previous presentations, it was really visible that that from the 1980s people are regularly using algorithms for stock exchange buying and selling, and it's really already the algorithmic trading in the stock exchange is affecting physical reality, because the speed of the data is really important for the stock exchange people. So they are building new connections. That's why they built a whole new pipeline under the Atlantic, and that's why. So however digital and however unbodied we seem to become. Still, there is this very harsh physical reality of how capital is shaping our economy and our society. And of course, this question of algorithmization comes also with a lot more moral or even juridical aspects. I've also read an article that now they are making tests for the self-driving cars, what to do in those situations where they can avoid killing more people with destroying the car themselves instead of hitting a big group of people. So it also brings up a lot of some seemingly post-human morals of how we can deal with our new companions in our society. So from this perspective, this is a very post-human topic exhibition, although it's just if we look at the core, it's just pieces of metal combined with very interesting spatial situations and very interesting materials, but it has very crucial questions of or it touches topics like this. Yeah, so as I mentioned, the exhibition as a site was somehow perceived or could be perceived as a site of future excavations or a site of future leftovers or future fossils, which are somehow visualized by the artist in these metallic forms, which also contains a lot of interesting use of materials. Pakuj hardware uses very often different kind of silicones, also used in prosthetics. So it's a certain kind of medical silicone, which is already used in not in everyday medical situations, but for those ones who already can afford it. And this is also a crucial question of the exhibition, because as I've mentioned before, it's an exhibition which has in a way a post-human perspective. So it is not really interested in this utopia or fantasy of our future bright society where everything will be outsourced to algorithms, but somehow it tries to bring in a new perspective to identify robots or algorithm-based mechanisms as a sort of post-human entity which we have to somehow start to include in our thinking and in our everyday encounters with reality, and this is also yes. I don't know if how much time do I have left, if I should go more into detail of the exhibition or just skip to the...
You've had 15 minutes, so you have
Okay.
some more time.
Okay, so maybe I just mention also a few other things that in the exhibition they were also using more or less found objects like these canisters, which were the fuel stations for the robots, which is also like a very one-to-one allegory to the whole topic of our today's seminar, that everything needs fuel, and it's yeah, you cannot avoid this. And they also used some seemingly skins, which are elastic silicone sculpture, in which they included also these chia seeds, which I'm not super familiar with, but I know it's part of this super healthy culture. What we really emphasize today, that we pollute everything, but we eat chia seeds to, to feel human and feel nice. And maybe I just try to somehow formulate a conclusion at the end of my presentation, that I somehow think, or I'm also convinced by a few other texts coming especially from the field of contemporary visual arts, that we are done with modernity, that all the utopian thinking, which seemed to be really interesting in the end of the 90s, and which came with the euphoria of modernism, also appearing in Central Eastern Europe, which was a society which used modernism only in terms, but was a really anti-avant-garde milieu. Somehow with all the social and economical changes which are highlighted by the financial crisis, or could be highlighted by the war on terror, which highlight such changes that we as a society are now completely detached from the Fordist like classical capitalism, and or our societies which were based on different types of class hierarchy became so speculative that we completely lost this economical and social model built on different kind of modernist utopias, and since now we have entered this speculative capitalist phase, now we are somehow much more pre-modern than, for instance, we used to be 20 years ago. So I think this is also a big part of the boom of post-internet art, and for instance how post-internet art is using mythology, or how post-internet art is using pre-modern references, or that's a really crucial point, because from a modernist utopian perspective, we simply can't imagine the future, and we seem to have dislocated our fantasies from the future, and with a modernist perspective, we can only speak about our present, but I think at these times it would be really important to somehow imagine what is going to happen with us as a society. Yeah, maybe we can speak about this in the next phase of the seminar. So thank you for your attention.
Well, so I'd like to invite all the speakers. You can also take a seat at the front. Maybe that's the best thing. So, Joanna and Inga. So, now there's a chance for. I mean, this officially ends at 7:30, and we should try and end as soon as we can after that. But now we've got at least 10 minutes for a chance to ask some questions and maybe discuss some of the issues that came up in these, I think, very strong and fascinating papers, presentations. Yeah, so I mean, if okay, to start with a question for everybody, which I think that you all already maybe began to address, or some people addressed it more directly, but I'd like to ask everybody is you know, how have you know? Are we entering a different phase because these histories move so quickly? And what I really want to try and pinpoint is how have things like the Internet of Things, which wasn't like directly mentioned, you know, this idea that you know the web, the internet, is directly connected to physical machines and things that are happening and production and so on in the physical world. Biotech, which was also mentioned, and artificial intelligence, and all these things that are happening now, which are changing the relationship of the internet to the physical world. This idea of that we're in like industry 4.0 and so on. It's a different kind of reality. Self-drive cars and you know, automatic cars, computerized cars, and so on. How have they changed, or how are they changing the ecology of the post-internet world? So that's, or is it basically the same? Are things basically, is it the same post-internet world, or are these things pushing us to something different?
I think nothing is the same.
Nothing is the same.
So I think we have become much more atomic society, and we are facing such global questions which we can't solve as an atomic society. So I think this is a really true discrepancy that for acting against the global warming, you can't act as small. I don't know how you call it, like entities. So you have to somehow be much more connected, but it's not going to go through all these companies and all these entities which have a financial interest in sustaining this whole thing which is being created. So I think we are going to die out really soon.
Okay.
No, I think I'm more positive, but not because like positive towards this acceleration and things kind of going faster and faster, and maybe society becoming more atomic, which I partially agree. But I think, well, I was recently, I think, reading, there was a Wire magazine that was saying that because the resources are so quickly spent, that many things will suddenly become unavailable or luxurious again. So, for example, we are at one point we had this kind of like expansion of cheap airfare and everything, and that kind of connection. And that was said in that article that by 2025, which actually is like 7 years, it will become like super luxurious, super expensive, because the resources will be like so much spent, like fuel and whatever. And then when you suddenly cannot travel that easy or that much, then you kind of go back to certain kind of more being local, or I don't know, like. And then maybe, there is more dependency on the internet, but I think even that can crash because the resources are somehow too fastly spent or something. So I think there might be some kind of like total backlash, but I'm not sure if we can actually predict that. So in that sense it's bad, but maybe it can, create something, again, more grassroots, which was something that I felt you felt that it's lacking. So I think actually it can work that way. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that the post-internet society level, it has left us something very dramatic. I feel that we are much more disconnected from our natural habitats, and I feel like we are acting much more machine-like, more and more. And in a very dystopic scenario like this, I think at the end we're gonna need to become much more machines in order to survive in this planet. That's how I see it. I think we need to pay very close attention to cyborg movements, to implants that are going to come very, very soon. And by becoming machines in order to survive, I mean things as, it's not science fiction, it's like practical stuff, like maybe we'll need to have some implants in our nose in order to be able to breathe the air that's going to be left here, and stuff like this. I know I see this coming in a way that it's not going to be pushed or forced, it's just going to happen naturally. That's what I feel it's going to happen.
but I mean, I'm also very optimistic when I hear this, but I also
This you're saying the
Yeah,
optimistic
no,
way of it's dramatic. I like much more the scenario.
I truly believe in this as a scenario. Just I'm not convinced in that way that this will be accessible for everyone. So
No, not at all.
Exactly,
It's
yeah.
absolutely
So
not. Yeah.
it seems like it will be like a huge division in the society.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like all of the arts pieces that were presented, all of them had this negative view of climate change and everything. Because it's a negative thing, but is there any artist like engaging with the other side, like trying to be more positive and trying to see like solutions and a little bit of hopeness after all? 'Cause, like you live room to be like this post-apocalyptic things, kind of sad.
Maybe I was thinking, I cannot think immediately about the artist, but someone that comes to mind is Anna Lovenhoff-Ting. Anna Lovenhoff-Ting. She's a theoretician, and she has written this wonderful book about mushroom. Yeah, and there you can really see that in these ruins that like when everything is bad and the forest there has been this deforestation. Which is bad ecologically, I don't know, economically, and is a consequence of something gone wrong. There is this mushroom that actually thrives in it, and then this mushroom, by thriving, it creates different kind of informal economies and this and that. And I think that's maybe one of the examples. I think maybe then more in the theory I could find that, which refers to something real.
There is this artist who is quite famous, Julian Oliver, that he released this piece this year, which is about using wind energy to mine cryptocurrencies, and after, with all the cryptocurrencies that would be generated by mining it with the wind energy, this could be given to climate change research. That's some of the approach. Still, it's like more in the ideal space. But that I can think about. Can this? I'm not sure somebody else. I'm pretty sure there is more initiatives, but they are not like in the artsy world. There is much more.
My question is also related to the previous one. That why are you doing it? So what do you want to achieve? What do you think your art achieves, or your
Mine specifically?
Yeah.
Mine raise awareness. Raise awareness and create frictions, basically. Because as I said, interfaces, they smooth everything. They just obfuscate all the processes that lie beyond the interface. And it's very important to start to...
yes, but they are aware and get home and then just keep going on with the same stuff.
Well, it's a process. I don't think that you can fix anything if you're not aware of what you need to fix first. So it's in this stage of let's raise awareness. That personally I feel that's something that I need to do now, because when I realized that the internet was wasting energy and natural resources, it was not so long ago. It was in 2013, and then I thought to myself, how could I be so naive for so many years? Yeah, and then everybody I talked since then, I mean, 99 of the people, they didn't realize it. Once I said it out loud, said yes, of course. But it's like it's so blocked in the social imagination, so it's just to make this connection.
I know, I mean, it's a problem that I'm going through at teaching at an art university, that I go there, raise awareness, and we go home and then just go on doing the same thing again. So it's like until you don't start organizing and
but I do start organizing stuff.
It's still
well, it's a process, as I say. I put
so you channel your this kind of raising awareness into actual.
Absolutely, I'm directing this project. It's called Critical Interface Politics. It's a research project. It's European funded, and we worked a lot towards how to redesign interfaces in order to make them much more sustainable and so on. Yeah, definitely.
So how do you see it? Because there's Brian Holmes, for example, he was here last year or the year before, and he's also kind of committed to taking action in a small scale and then spread it globally.
Maybe there's quite a good comparison there. For Brian Holmes, also the project that I think you're talking about was about exposing and revealing this infrastructure, this hidden infrastructure of moving goods around and so on, the infrastructure.
Well, I'm just interested
Pipelines
in
of the internet, as you showed.
good practices to.
But I think that it's very important, this idea that things should be affirmative and think positively and be afraid of this kind of more doomsday visions. It's also kind of, I feel it's a little bit of a kind of imperative at the moment. That Anna's thing, like that everyone has to follow. We have to all think positively about things. It might happen, it might not. There might be some solution, they not necessarily have to. But I feel there is kind of, at the moment in the art world, there is kind of real pressure to think positively, to see climate change as an opportunity. And then it becomes like a mantra. We all have to agree that it's going to be great chance that really everyone will be this mushroom which thrives and thrives, and everything will be like, we're all going to like, you know, capitalism will survive. That's
yeah, exactly. That's the stay positive so we can quantify and keep
out.
Well, I mean, on a similar vein, I'm starting to see more things. I mean, I'm reading more things about sort of internet detox and about people unplugging. And I just today there was an article about a new cafe that's opened that's banning the use of devices because it wants to recreate conviviality. So presumably they think they're going to get some customers. So I mean, is the sort of unplug option part of the response? How do you see that?
It's about it's about the accelerating production in any levels, not just in data, but still, since this is not going to happen in general, it's very hard. Like I'm working now with an environmental scientist that he's consulting some architectures to make, I don't know, like sustainable buildings, and they had this discussion whether they should teach the user how to behave in order to make a building much more sustainable, or to design the building in order to change the user behavior, right? So I think, yeah, because to unplug, okay, you unplug and what, right? I think that we should just make this, especially interfaces, because the thing that we see, graphic and physically, to modify our behavior in a way, yeah? I mean, it might sound a little bit fascist in a way, but otherwise, I don't know. So that's the...
So maybe this unplugging is a bit like using this cotton bag instead of a plastic bag, that it's just like this small solution that we every day do, believing that something will change, but actually it's more this cooperation.
How many cotton bags do you have? I have a lot.
Many, but I always forget them.
Yeah, right? It's like I have like at least 50 at home.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Like there is this paradox that has been mentioned already, like that you speak about the energy waste and the overproduction of information by producing even more information.
Yes.
So like this is the first question, and also in this context, how would you position art production? Because like you said that internet it's not like essential to survival, right? And nor is art. So and obviously we are living in a world where like art is like there is an overproduction of art in like on each continent. So how do you see the this overproduction of information and then also overproduction of art in this context?
Yeah, no, but I think I will get back to this question of rendering things visible, and what I think Joanna's practice also does, and what like Louis Henderson does. Of course, he's spending by, and you're spending by creating your artwork. But the idea is that you're actually speaking about the things which are pretty much invisible, or that you need to search for them, or they're messy, or they're like not true, and there's like. And that moment you kind of focus, and there is this like piece created. And of course, and then you can speak about the role of the art in general, what you already addressed, and I think it's not and it's a different role than of the activist action, obviously, and you cannot deny. But I think about this production of art, and that every exhibition is also like a new yeah, it creates new waste because you create new vitrines for every exhibition. And now it's very funny because for the next exhibition we're gonna reuse some of the vitrines which you saw in that exhibition. And because we have this designer who is actually thinking that it's a nice idea, and we will actually paint them a little bit and fix them to the ugly walls. And I was so sad because I felt like I also want new vitrines for my exhibition. Like, can't we make new vitrines? And that is actually impossible because we don't have a storage where to put them, and it is incredibly silly to do that. So in a sense, we will reuse the vitrines. But of course, it's on a very small level. Actually, it doesn't matter if we maybe also create new or don't create new. I think it's a bigger problem anyway.
Okay. Can I just ask you a question about the strength, the power of this system, of this technological system? Is it so invincible, or are there new risks for the system in the post-internet age? Is it actually quite a vulnerable system? When you saw those cables, you could just imagine someone cutting those cables.
I did too. So someone comes with big pliers and cuts off. But what happens to us? Are we just becoming like archaeologists?
In a physical sense, but maybe also in a more metaphorical sense. That also a lot of these processes and the interfaces and the data and the way that this problem of content collapse and so on. Actually, maybe it's not so self-sustaining. Are there new vulnerabilities that could be exploited also by artists, by people who want to change the system?
There is this artist now, he's a friend of mine. He designed these 3D printable scissors to cut undersea cables, actually. And it's open source, you can download it, print it, and it's funny. But I think that for me the problem somehow it's like our imagination is so similar to the system. It's really hard to sort of rate imagination. I think that rate is a very strong word, but I'm not sure we are more capable of imagining the end of the world than the end of capitalism, right? So I think that we should aim at strategies that can modify these circuits in the brain in order to think different, and I have no clue how to do that actually. But
that was my question, that we are facing, or
because
you're saying that we are facing a global problem, but it's really difficult.
Yeah, but the thing is, like, we always look for radical end solutions, and I think we need just to realize that we're just taking one step at a time, and things will come. Because a lot of times it's like, okay, how we avoid climate change, how we erase capitalism. Whoa, we have no clue, but
yeah, we should make the algorithms learn how to uncapitalize.
How uncapitalize? But even I don't think we'd be capable to design such algorithms yet, not just yet. But probably very good.
I'm just thinking, what about the viruses? Because maybe they can develop somehow.
They're totally capitalist.
They're unfortunately capitalist, because they would work in some.
I was curious about the parallels you were drawing from this pre-internet generation, and sort of looking from this Soviet space of surveillance and the sort of surveillance practices and the sort of loneliness and the material objects then. And I was just thinking, in reference to all of your calculations about how much resources we're using for every little thing now, what are the comparisons in terms of the newness of the resources that get used in any age, and the types of connections that need to be made at any big transition, right? So I'm sure that if you were driving now to the library every time to look in a book, to look up everything that you look on the internet, you might waste more energy, right, than doing it than the internet uses. Or, I'm just curious about the comparisons and what's the next. So we'll use up all of these metals, maybe then we'll use something else, right? Not to put a pretty face on it, but actually this is the way capitalism works. You find a new frontier that you can then take care of, and you recreate the same problems through it, the same alienation, the same atomization in a new form, the same resource exploitation. But so I'm just curious whether that's, it's just more of the same, or is there a qualitative difference?
Yeah, because I'm curious about what you said about these grassroots, that after like a flight it's gonna become like a super unaffordable, and we'll go back to this grassroots community, local organization, and I'm curious how long until this is gonna be capitalized and put
And
into
again,
yeah, that's the, because that's probably gonna happen. I'm not sure. I mean, it's really big questions. We need a future time machine.
Maybe Aaron's presentation as well gave us hints to the answer to that, because in a way this moving towards a sort of post-human situation where maybe we shouldn't worry so much about ourselves as humans in this future. You know, in a way you're talking about various cybernetic constructs and hybrid forms which will then carry on and do what they do. So we put ourselves so much in the story, but maybe we can't assume that we are the center of this story as it moves forward.
Yeah, I mean, surely are not in that way. Now we think we are, but I'm still quite afraid of it.
Okay, so maybe we should close it there. Is there any more questions? Okay.
Just a quick one, sorry. In all three of the presentations, it seemed like there are two sort of sides in this story. One is us humans, or maybe the artists, and on the other side there is the system. It's this impersonal something. And is it maybe possible to involve the people in that system that are sort of driving that system? Because it also connects to how we are pushing responsibility for overconsumption on the consumer, never the producer.
Yeah, but it doesn't work, if you just push it to the consumer. I guess that's the problem. Yeah. And there's too much on stake for being able to push the producer. In terms of how the power is distributed, and kind of like very depressive.
I mean, a few years ago there was this hope spread around also by Bifo and Gert Loving that had like a manifesto of the softwareists. There was this great hope that all the softwareists, all the people who write the software for all these networks will rise up, and that would sort of bring the revolution. But that doesn't sort of feel like it's going to happen at the moment.
It happened to us. Assange.
It did happen, but then it's still, nothing's really changed.
I've gone to prison.
The software is, so, I mean, that's...
I think we have one more.
Yes, no, it's just based on that. I think it's crazy to think about what you just said, and thank you very much, it was really interesting. And the whole idea of e-democracy and social media that is based on the concept of like sharing ideas and finding new alternatives. So it's based on this like positive way of thinking about the internet and finding new solutions, and then you have the other side and you're just like, no, it isn't like that. So it's weird to compare that. Yes.
I think this very much came to the fore in all of your presentations. What is on the surface and what is at the back, and how much the connections is to the slavery, to exploitation, to extraction, and oppressing of the planet and of the species and of the people, and how not much different Amazon world is from the world of 19th century workers or pre that period. So some things seem to be not changed really, although it looks so updated.
Yeah, I don't know, and it just like we'll make a small note, because like maybe to your question as well, because when Ursula K. Le Guin died recently, the people were posting all around her quotations, right? And because she's a sci-fi writer and extremely important and interesting, and then one of the quotations that people would post would be that she says that, I don't know if she ever said it, that wow, like I don't know, many hundreds of years ago, people believed that monarchy is the only possible way, and then, you know, like they got democracy or something. Even though I would say, yeah, but if you look at the 500 years ago back, it's still kind of the same. It's actually colonialism and the long modernity, and in a sense, there's not really a very positive change. But on the other hand, of course, like we have achieved many things, like, I don't know, like women's rights and many things that have happened through certain kind of movements. So I think it's not that depressive at all. Of course, there is like always a backlash. When you achieve something, then Donald Trump comes and it's like a pendulum. But it's kind of like, there is no definite answer and there is no like way how to do it, but I think on the other hand something is changing.
I think that's a very good message. So thank you all very much for you who came and for the presentations.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.